It's crossover Thursday, and the Washington Commanders have beaten the Atlanta Falcons 4 times in a row. Will they make it lucky number 5? And speaking of number 5, will Jayden Daniels play this weekend?
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back to another illustrious episode of Locked On Falcons and Locked On Commanders. Today is Crossover Thursday, presented by Prize Picks. Make sure you download the Prize Picks app today and use code Locked On NFL, and you'll get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. So if you do not know me, I'm your very humble host, Aaron Freeman, the humble host of Locked On Falcons, and I am joined by the illustrious David Harrison, the host of Locked On Commanders, and we are here to preview this Week 4 battle between the Atlanta Falcons and Washington Commanders. We'll be talking keys to victories, big-time, intriguing matchups, the injuries that may affect this outcome, as well as the big stories. But we appreciate all of you that make Locked On Falcons and Locked On Commanders your first listen. Those of you that call yourselves the everydayers, and all you have to do to become an everydayer, subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So this is a battle that has been raging these last several years, with Washington and Atlanta facing off each of the last 4 years. Unfortunately for the Falcons, Washington has taken all of them. They'll be looking to get their 5th win in a row over Atlanta and potentially their first road win of the 2025 season, while the Falcons are looking for their first home win of the 2025 season. This, of course, is a rematch of that Week 17 battle in primetime between Atlanta and Washington won that one, essentially killing the Falcons' playoff hopes. No playoff implications right now, at least this stage in the season. But given that the Falcons are coming off a very tough Week 3 loss, there is a similar sense of urgency to see if they can get their season back on track. But David, my friend, let's start off talking about what's the big story for Washington. And I imagine it's sort of the ongoing injury concerns, starting with the quarterback position.
Yeah, it does start with Jayden Daniels. Obviously, he's the guy that kind of makes this thing run, the way that he usually does. Not that Marcus Mariota isn't certainly capable himself, which he showed against the Las Vegas Raiders last weekend. But Jayden, obviously is coming into a season where a lot of people had high hopes, taking that second season step forward, or where some people were asking, is there going to be a sophomore slump? All that stuff. You come out in Week 1 against the New York Giants, and he wasn't the most accurate we've ever seen him, but the Commanders still put up 200 plus rushing yards against that defense, come away with a win, go into Green Bay, and I think pretty much every element of the team feels like they let them everybody down at some point in time, even though they were kind of in that game a little bit later than the game flow would suggest. But then they bounced back in Week 3 against the Raiders, another 200 plus rushing yard effort as a team, and just kind of come out and really kind of dominate them. So it's kind of been a Jekyll and Hyde. It's feast or famine type of thing for the Commanders this season. But Jayden, getting him back on the field, I think every defensive coordinator in the NFL would agree that you'd rather face Marcus Mariota than Jayden Daniels. But even if Marcus has proven to be capable of running Kliff Kingsbury's offense in the few games that he's had the opportunity to, but beyond him, man, I mean, you have Jayden, obviously, with Terry McLaurin. I don't expect Terry McLaurin to be active in this game. I'll just tell you that right here early in the week. Jonathan Jones, cornerback that they got from the Patriots, is on IR right now. Will Harris just broke his leg last week. He is on IR. Dietrich Wise Jr., the defensive end, is out for the season. Austin Eckler is out for the season. Sam Cosmi is still yet to return after suffering a knee injury against the Detroit Lions last year. So this team is just banged up beyond belief. The good news is, at least in the game against the Raiders, a lot of role players, a lot of depth players, guys getting opportunities to step up. They actually did step up, including receiver Luke McCaffrey scoring a 43-yarder to essentially put the Raiders away, getting his first NFL touchdown. So that's the good news. But obviously, as much as you love it, you don't want to test those waters too many times if you can. So everybody looking to see if the Washington Commanders can get at least a little bit healthier this week.
Yeah, I'm glad you are feeling like Terry McLaurin's not going to play because it doesn't seem like AJ Terrell is also going to play in this. They haven't quite ruled him out, but when asked about it on Wednesday, Raheem Morris didn't sound his usual optimistic tone that usually where we have a little hope. He says like, oh yeah, I think he'll be ready to play, but we'll see later in the week. And that's there. And he was like, I'm hopeful, but didn't sound as enthusiastic about it. And obviously in that week 17 game, we saw what AJ Terrell was able to do in the case of Terry McLaurin. And I was very concerned going into this game, when we'll talk later, obviously, about some of the key matchups, but very concerned if Terry McLaurin plays in this game, who's going to cover him, because the drop off from AJ Terrell to the next best corner for the Atlanta Falcons is significant. Although Mike Hughes and D. Alford played reasonably well last week, the defense played reasonably well last week, even though they gave up 30 points. But, some of that was a pick six. Some of that was turnovers, putting Carolina in prime scoring position. And so the scoreboard doesn't tell the full story of it for the defense, but it does tell the full story for the offense. The fact that the Falcons scored 0 points was due to their poor performance on that side of the ball. Michael Penix arguably playing his worst game of his career, short career at this point, against Carolina. And the Falcons are looking to see if he and his offense can rebound after a tough day. I do expect them to play better. I won't go on the line and say, it can't get worse. Oh, it absolutely can get worse. You can never set the bar too low for the Atlanta Falcons, if you ask me. But I do expect them to play much better. And the question is going to be, is it going to be good enough to beat this Washington offense, as you said, that looked pretty poised with Marcus Mariota? And David, in the course of researching this matchup, there's been a lot of discourse about the Falcons' overuse of pistol and needing to go under center. And I'm just so intrigued by how the Washington Commanders can pull off the impossible. At least here locally in Atlanta, it seems to be the impossible, as being the only team that hasn't gone under center the entire season. And yet somehow their offense seems to be functional. I'm being sarcastic a little bit because I feel like the whole pistol, shotgun, under center stuff is way overblown here in Atlanta, but it is kind of a big story of the week. But, you got any secrets on how you can pull it off without having to go under center every single snap?
I mean, I think that, with just, looking at the way the Washington Commanders do it, because they run a good amount of pistol, from time to time as well. But when you have a quarterback like Jayden Daniels, even a straight up, run with out of the pistol formation turns into a read option. And there are times where you go back and you look at it, you're like, oh, there's actually not a read option because Jayden isn't even looking to try to keep the ball or run or anything like that. But as a defense, you just kind of have to acknowledge it and you have to kind of respect it. I think really the issue with the Falcons, running as much as they do out of the pistol, has to do with the quarterback they have. They just don't have the quarterback to really threaten. I think Michael Penix Jr., he's capable of doing some things with his legs, obviously, but he's just not to the level of a Jayden Daniels as far as an athlete, to where defense are just inherently going to be worried about whether or not he pulls the ball, keeps it in, and beats them around the edge. And I think that's part of the problem. A lot of the times you'll see the Washington Commanders with Marcus Mariota run more of a traditional, shotgun with a sidecar running back. Do those things. And even if Marcus is in a read option situation, you're just a little bit more forward. And also, having a young running back, like there's things you have to do as far as, pressing the line of scrimmage, setting up your blocks, things like that. And I think the Washington Commanders, every coaching staff has their teachers. Anthony Lynn is a very experienced running back coach here in Washington and teaches all of his guys the exact same way. They do a really good job of pressing the line of scrimmage and really setting up their blocks and allowing those guys to do those things. So again, being someone who, I watched the Falcons getting ready for this matchup, I can't, break down obviously the Falcons, but I just know those are some of the things that the Commanders do really well to make it work. But, if you don't have a super athletic quarterback, like, you can't just go out there and tell Michael Penix, hey, be more athletic. Like, you can't, that's not really a thing that you can do. And so I think that's kind of part of the problem is just scheming to your personnel. And if that is a problem for the Falcons offense, I would say it's more on the coordinator and all that than, putting that type of a scheme in when you don't have the things to really help that type of a scheme work properly.
Well, criticizing Zach Robinson is music to the ears of all Falcon fans at this point. But you talk about the quarterback mobility. That's going to be a challenge for this Falcons defense. And we'll see if the Falcons can match up, as well as break down some of the other intriguing matchups in this Week 4 action as we continue today's Crossover Thursday. Today's episode is presented by FanDuel. With the NFL season being here, FanDuel is making you a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use all across the app. And right now over at FanDuel, if you check out the line for this week 4 battle, it is the Commanders favored by 1.5 points, but that line may move. It's already moved this week in the Falcons' favor. It may continue to move depending on the injury status. So don't waste your time. Head on over to FanDuel. Whether you're looking to bet the spread, money line, you want to bet some player props, or you love the same game parlay. We love the same game parlay. You bet a little, you win a lot with multiple bets in the same game. Just head on over to FanDuel.com right now, download the FanDuel app, and make sure when you place your first $5 bet, if it wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets. Again, that's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Today's episode is also brought to you by Wayfair. Now, when you think game day, you may not think Wayfair, but you should, because Wayfair is the best kept secret for incredible and affordable game day finds. Wayfair has everything you need to get your space ready for this season or any season, whether you're tailgating outdoors or cheering from your living room. And I know we're talking about football season, but I also love Wayfair because they're going to help me get ready for the upcoming holiday seasons, Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas. And I'm trying to up my festive feelings to get out of this Falcons funk, and Wayfair is offering great selections for that. Plus, delivery is free, fast, and hassle-free. Wayfair is your trusted destination for all things game day, from coolers to grills to recliners to slow cookers. Shop, save, and score today at Wayfair.com. That's Wayfair.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. Continuing with today's Crossover Thursday with myself, Aaron Freeman, and David Harrison. And we are talking about key matchups. David, we just finished talking about the importance and impact of the QB run game for Washington and one of the elements that makes their offense go. And I think that's going to be kind of, for me, the first intriguing matchup. How do the Falcons deal with the QB run game? They've struggled so far this season in 3 games going up against Baker Mayfield, JJ McCarthy, and Bryce Young with the improvised run game. But Washington brings a different beast with the design QB run game, as you sort of illustrated with the read option plays and some of the design runs that they have, whether it's Jayden Daniels, whether it's Marcus Mariota. And if the Falcons, basically this season, if it's 3rd and 6 and you need your quarterback to go pick up 7 yards to move the chains, teams have had a lot of success doing that against this Falcons defense, despite some of the athleticism that they have up front, that they should be better at this. And this is going to be a real challenge, regardless of Mariota or Daniels. I expect the Falcons to have different options, trying to spy those guys, keep an eye on those guys. Jalen Walker, their first-round draft pick, Divine Diablo, Caden Ellis. It'll be a rotating cast of characters. Hopefully they can maybe use different guys to give Washington different looks, present some blitz looks, and you don't know who's going to drop and potentially be that QB spy. And maybe they get a couple of free rushers like they were able to get last time they played Washington in week 17. So I think that's going to be a big, intriguing matchup for me when it comes to the Falcons defense going up against this Commanders offense. What about you?
Yeah, I think that's what you're going to have to do if you're the Falcons, right? You got to try to confuse the quarterback, whether it's Marcus or whether it's Jayden. You got to try to make them hesitate a little bit, make them hold the ball longer, make them, maybe pull it when they should have given it to the back, or give it to the back when they should have pulled it, do those kinds of things. When I look at the Falcons defense, I kind of look at it similarly to the Giants defense, in the sense that I think that, the place where the Washington Commanders can really make their money on the ground is on the edge. And that's actually, that's my number one matchup for this team as well. It's not just the quarterback run game, but just rushing attack in general, right? The number 2 rushing attack in the NFL right now belongs to the Washington Commanders, 157.3 yards per game, off the back of 200-plus yard rushing efforts, like we talked about earlier in the episode. A lot of zone read, a lot of RPO, but also a lot of perimeter running. And I think the Atlanta Falcons, just looking at their first 3 games, which I know still a small sample size, right? Overall, allowing less than 100 yards per game, but on the left side, they're giving up 5.3 yards per carry over left guard. They're giving up 6.1 yards per carry on the left end. And obviously that's, I think, where the Washington Commanders are going to try to go, run behind Laramie Tunsil, run behind maybe Chris Paul, maybe Brandon Coleman. Brandon Coleman was the starting left guard until last week, and then he was kind of a surprise, healthy and active. Chris Paul came in there, did a pretty good job. Tyler Biadasz obviously is anchoring the line there for the Washington Commanders. And if you could run on that left side and get that, 5 yards per carry, 6 yards per carry, whatever it is, that's going to kind of soften things up the middle, maybe even give you some opportunities to kind of surprise them on the right side where they are markedly better. But, do those things and then essentially do what led to Terry McLaurin's 50-plus yard reception and what led to Luke McCaffrey's first NFL touchdown, get the Falcons to stack the box the way that the Raiders did last week, and then use that kind of limited coverage in a stacked box look to get guys in single coverage, get them open, and hit them with open passes and make big plays off of that. And I think that's not what people expect from a Kliff Kingsbury offense is run to set up the pass. But what we saw last week against the Raiders was run to set up the run, to set up further runs, to set up the pass. You know what I mean? Like that's really what you got out of this offense. And I think that's the prescription moving forward. Like it might even be a season-long deal, because what's great about this running back room for the Washington Commanders is you have a guy in Chris Rodriguez Jr. who has power, decisive running ability between the tackles, between the guards, to really kind of come in and try to set the tone. And then you've got the exciting rookie Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, we call him Bill out here, who's got some shiftiness, some really good vision, can catch passes out of the backfield, do those things. And if you bring him in 2 or 3 series in, he's got fresh legs going up against a defense that's been dealing with a power run from Chris Rodriguez Jr. The vet Jeremy McNichols can come in there, get mixed in there as well with fresh legs. And then at the end of the game, if you need to run down the clock, do whatever, you go back to Chris Rodriguez, who now maybe has sat out 4 or 5 series, and now his legs are a lot fresher. And the good thing about all these backs is they've proven, some of them in small sample sizes, but each of them at least has proven in their opportunities so far that they don't need 5 or 6 carries to be effective. Chris Rodriguez Jr.'s first carry against the Raiders went for 5 yards. He was averaging about 6.3 yards per carry until the end of game scenario, where obviously the Raiders know the Commanders are running the ball. Chris Rodriguez's average dropped down to about 3.3 yards per carry for the entire game because of that period. But that just kind of shows you how Kliff Kingsbury was able to establish the run with the team that he has, and then use that to open up the pass later on in the game. And I think it worked beautifully. And I think if you're the Commanders, you make the Falcons prove that they're going to stop it before you take it away yourself.
Yeah, I think, Washington committing to running the football can be effective against this defense. It has been a vulnerability of the Falcons, throughout the season. And, that's a big reason why I think this offense needs to come to play in order to hopefully get an early lead and force Washington to play from behind, and hopefully limit the impact of that run game and force, Mariota or potentially Jayden Daniels to throw the ball. Although, Jayden Daniels throwing the ball, this doesn't feel like a great proposition. But, maybe without Terry McLaurin in the mix, it lowers the bar that they have to clear. But you talk about the Commanders running backs. To me, when I look at the big matchup for the Falcons offense going up against its defense, to me, this is a Bijan Robinson game. And I thought Bijan had a great performance against this Washington team in week 17. To me, he was really the engine that allowed the Falcons to get that early lead at halftime. And I felt like the Falcons kind of abandoned the run in the second half, even though it was kind of the thing that allowed them to get the lead. And to me, that contributed, although it wasn't obviously the only reason why Washington was able to work themselves back into that game and retake the lead at the end and ultimately win that game. And, then it's the run game, as well as Bijan in the passing game. They've found some opportunities in that game to try to get Bijan matched up one-on-one against Bobby Wagner and, these Commanders linebackers that are very physical, very tough, right? But aren't the fleetest of foot. You saw that with Bobby Wagner and others in that Green Bay game going up against Tucker Kraft. It's also an opportunity for Kyle Pitts. But I really do think Bijan can do wonders for this team, not only on the ground, but also in the passing game. And I think that will be a thing that can really stabilize this Falcons offense and really get them back on track if they can just get the ball in Bijan's hand and just let him work the magic that we know he's capable of doing.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be priority number one for the Commanders defense. Michael Penix is obviously going to be incredibly important to the success or failure of this Commanders defense in this game, but Bijan Robinson has to be priority. You want to put the ball in Michael Penix's hand. The way you do that is you stop that offense from getting off the ground from Jump Street. You keep Bijan Robinson from hurting you, and you make Michael Penix Jr. throw the ball from 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, 3rd and 7, and you on the other side play complementary football, get some points on the board, like you said. Everybody wants to play from ahead, so it's no secret and no surprise that every team is going to say they want their team playing from ahead. But that's how you put the pressure on the Atlanta Falcons. And then I think Joey Jr., what you got to do is you got to have a secondary game plan. You got to have a plan ready for if the Atlanta Falcons turn to Kirk Cousins, because if you turn to Kirk Cousins, you're not doing it because you just want to run the ball more with Bijan Robinson. Although you still love to do that, I think that in that situation, if the Falcons turn to Kirk, you're probably leading if you're Washington for one. And at that point in time, you kind of play off a little bit. You maybe play a little bit of a softer zone. You kind of let the coverage come to the ball and do all those things, force Kirk to kind of sift through everything, use your front four to try to get pressure. And then you basically dare them to start running the ball more with Bijan as the clock winds down and use that kind of tendency against the Falcons. So I think Joey Jr. has got to have 2 game plans ready, which is a little bit more of a challenge. But the good news is if you have to use game plan number 2, it's because game plan number 1 worked pretty well.
That's probably true. I think if Kirk Cousins sees the field, something terrible happened for the Atlanta Falcons and probably something wonderful for the Washington Commanders. But with that being said, let's get into some of the things that these teams are going to have to do. We've already sort of touched upon, getting an early lead. We'll see what else these teams need to do to come away with a victory as we wrap up today's Crossover Thursday here on Locked On Falcons and, of course, Locked On Commanders. Today's episode is presented by Game Time. Whether you're a Commanders fan looking to invade or a Falcons fan who wants to defend the home turf, Game Time is the place to go if you're looking to score tickets for this weekend's action in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Game Time is going to take the hassle and guesswork out of buying tickets. And, I won't necessarily speak for David, but I know I absolutely love the panoramic seat views that you get with Game Time. So you see exactly what you're getting so that, when you're in the stadium, whether you're cheering for the home or road team, you know what you're getting. And if you're a first-time Game Time user, you're going to save so much money, right? With the promo code Locked On NFL, $20 that you'll save to be exact. And if you're new to Mercedes-Benz Stadium, $20 goes a very, very long way when it comes to concessions. And save on tickets, splurge on concessions. It's an unbeatable deal that Game Time is offering. Just download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Wrapping up today's Crossover Thursday presented by Prize Picks here on Locked On Falcons and Locked On Commanders. Of course, I'm your host, Aaron Freeman. Locked On Falcons, David Harrison of Locked On Commanders. And David, when we look ahead to this matchup, again, the Falcons are the underdogs, 1.5 point underdogs to this Commanders team. You're feeling good about that line in terms of Washington's ability to cover, that FanDuel line before we get into these keys to victory?
Yeah, I mean, look, every game is different. Every week is an opportunity for, the unexpected to happen, for people to step up when maybe they haven't before and all those things. But I think, given just kind of what has been happening with the Falcons this season, what's been happening with the Commanders this season, I think, momentum is a real thing in football. And I think the Commanders have a lot of it and the Falcons just don't have a lot of it. So, yeah, I think Commanders, personally, I'd probably be willing to take the Commanders like +7 or by 7.5, like over 1 score. But history tells us that this is probably going to be a close game because even though, you mentioned the Commanders have beaten the Falcons 4 years in a row, it's never been by more than 1 score. So, these two teams are not rivals, even though they play every year. But they certainly play each other tough when they get together. Yeah.
So talking about, what the Falcons need to do in order to win a potential 1-score game, again, I think we already mentioned one of them. It is get off to a fast start. Obviously, as you said, David, that kind of dictates the terms. You get the opposing team to play on your terms as opposed to you having to play on their terms. The other thing is, kind of big picture stuff for the Atlanta Falcons, right? The alarm is sounding. Right? Don't roll over and just ignore and snooze that alarm. You're getting a wake up call after last week's game against Carolina. Turn the negative into a positive. You got a blowout loss. It's a wake up call for your season that, you need to play with a sense of urgency. You need to approach every game like it's a playoff game. And Carolina was the easiest potential game for the Falcons in their first 6 games, the most winnable game, and they got absolutely wrecked in that game. And so now this team And week 4 needs to start playing with the urgency. So that to me is another one. And then special teams matters. You saw last week with Washington against the Raiders, some big kicks from Matt Gay, some big returns in the return game. The Falcons special team has been up and down. It was bad week 1, good week 2, bad week 3. So I guess it's due for a good game in week 4, but they're going to need that if they're going to win a close game. What about you when you look at the flip side for the Commanders? What do they need to do in order to win?
Yeah, I think the Washington Commanders need to establish the run early, right? We kind of already talked about that or whatever. Use that, that squad of running backs that they have. And I didn't even mention Deebo Samuel, who is kind of a, de facto running back when they need him to be. We saw a direct snap to him against the Raiders that really took all of us by surprise. Like they're literally another reporter sitting next to me as the play's going on. He goes, "Wait a second, what just happened?" I said, they snapped the ball directly to Deebo. Not something we'd ever seen during training camp or during the preseason. So obviously they've been working on that behind closed curtains. So, that's number one. That gives you control of the clock. It gives you control of the pace of the game. I think the biggest tool that a young quarterback can have is patience and poise. Draining the clock makes a young quarterback impatient and makes them lose some of that poise. And speaking of that, also getting hit helps a young quarterback lose a little bit of that pressure. Michael Penix Jr., the way you did Geno Smith, 5 sacks in week 3 for the Commanders defense. I know Michael Penix was a little bit rattled under pressure against Carolina Panthers. You need to find a way to do the same thing that defense did. I know, look, this defense has got some dogs on it. Javon Kinlaw is not out there trying to make friends. He's out there trying to hurt people's feelings, and he's looking forward to this matchup. Daron Payne. I mean, last week we saw Daron Payne playing everything from the 0 to the 5. He's not going to play wide 9, right? But 0 to 5, any technique in between, Daron Payne is going to be there, and he's going to be a guy who's looking to make an impact on this team. So as Bijan Robinson tries to run, off the left edge, off the right edge, they're going to have the guys out there to try to bottle him in and then get to Michael Penix Jr. There's a play last week, Aaron, where Geno Smith was under pressure, darn near threw the ball to where only a Washington Commanders lineman was standing. He had dropped off in coverage on a cross dog look, and I thought he was going to do it. In real time, I was like, he's about to do this. He didn't do it. I feel like that's a situation where a young quarterback probably does it, and that's what the Washington Commanders are going to look to force. And then the third phase, Washington Commanders punt returner rookie Jayden Lane out of Virginia Tech has been absolutely explosive. Had a 90-yard punt return touchdown against the Raiders, but believe me, that is not the only good return this kid has had. He looks like a very legit punt returner. So the Washington Commanders are going to look to force the Falcons to punt from their own end, from the minus end of the field, to hopefully get a long punt, give Jayden Lane a little bit of runway to get going, find a seam and hit it. The Atlanta Falcons obviously need to probably try to not allow that to happen. And they've been one of the better punt coverage teams in the NFL, maybe quietly so because of everything else going on. So I think that's going to be a really important battle. If the Falcons punt coverage team and punter can prevent Jayden Lane from having an impact in this game, I think it's going to help the Falcons. But if Jayden Lane can, of course, if he breaks the touchdown return, obviously that's huge. But even if it's not a touchdown, if he can get 14 yards here, 15 yards there, maybe a 20-yarder here or there, and just impact that field position game, and that's going to be huge. And, of course, Deebo Samuel, talk about the multi-tool type of receiver that he is, 69-yard kickoff return to start the game against the Raiders. He's always dangerous when he touches the ball. So special teams, at least especially in the return game, is going to be incredibly important. I'm hoping, even if it's for both teams, that these kickers going back inside can get their act together, because neither of them – I mean, Matt Gay has had a better day, playing outside in Northwest than Romo did, but like hopefully going inside helps both these kickers, and then it comes down to the return teams.
Yeah, up and down kicking performance for both of these teams. And of course, because these games tend to be so close, it's going to boil down to a field goal like it did last time, where Riley Patterson had a chance to, win it for the Falcons, and he didn't win it for the Falcons. And it's going to be a Matt Gay field goal or a John Parker Romo or possibly Ben Sauls. Who knows? We don't even know who the Falcons kicker is going to be this week. So we'll see. So that's sort of why it's going to matter that whoever is holding that spot down, they do their job. And we'll see if the rest of both of these teams do their job. I'm sure David will have more coverage of the impact of these injuries, as well as some of the other things he'll be looking at as the week wraps up on Locked On Commanders. Of course, Locked On Falcons will have more to talk about in this week 4 battle. That is going to do it for us here on Crossover Thursday, presented by Prize Picks. And of course, now that you're done with your first listen here, make sure you check out Locked On NFL for your second listen. 2 shows daily. The Madman, Tyler Rowland, give you that shot of espresso in the morning, and then head on over to the barbershop to listen to the dulcet tones of Tony Wiggins to get you geared for the second show of Locked On NFL. It is all part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.